Well, after much speculation and losing a handful of caucus MLAs, John Rustad has been pushed out as leader of the BC Conservatives. He's been replaced by Surrey White Rock MLA Trevor Halford as interim leader after 20 MLAs signed a letter saying they had lost confidence in Rustad. We are joined now by our political panel. Mo Sahota, former BCNDP cabinet minister, currently operates his own lobbying company. Rachel Siegel, former senior director of the BC Liberal Party and vice president and BC lead for Enterprise Canada. And Arzina Hamir, former candidate for the Provincial Green Party, currently operates an organic farm business in the Comox Valley. Good morning to all three of you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Are we supposed to be gentle because it's Monday?
Are you supposed to be gentler?
Gentle, that's what you were saying.
Yes.
It's Monday.
Yeah, it's Monday.
Okay.
We're trying to be, we're easing people into the week. So,
okay.
Yeah, you can ramp things up as we get closer to 8 o'clock. How's that? Rachel, we'll begin with you. So, according to reporting from our own Justin McElroy, the 20 MLAs who allegedly called for Rustad's removal don't really fit neatly into a single box. They come from all sides of the party. And not long ago, the same group of MLAs rallied around Rustad's Conservatives and almost won an election. Where did Rustad go wrong in the last year?
Well, I think that it's not about what John did wrong. It's about, the history of the party. And he was able to bring this party to a place where they almost won the election a mere year ago. And so I think that John should be praised for the incredible work that he did, not only on behalf of the BC Conservatives, but for British Columbians that hold conservative values that are aligned to the party. And like you talk about, Stephen, I mean, when I was with the BC Liberals, and we know this, that the center-right in British Columbia are a big tent party. And so what John was able to do was to bring the party together and to really have an incredible electoral performance a year ago. Now that has shifted. We've talked about what that red line would be in terms of John's leadership, and seeing caucus come out and say it's time for a new leader. And like you said, that was caucus members from the center, from the right, coming together and saying it's time for the next chapter of the BC Conservatives is what ultimately led to his resignation.
Well, what is, though, that next chapter? Because I can't tell, why Rustad was ousted. Is it because he's too far one way or not far enough one way? Or what direction is the party headed?
The party will run a leadership race, and really it's about British Columbians telling the party where it's headed. I mean, this is a party that had no seats prior to John Rustad coming in and leading it. And now it's about deciding, based on a lot of where the NDP are, what kind of party the Conservatives will be in the next year. And so we're seeing names come out in the leadership race right now that mirror just the big tent party that we are seeing under the BC Conservatives. We have people that are very right. We have people that are centrist, names that are floating around. And really, it'll be up to members of the party to decide what that next chapter looks like. But again, Stephen, this is not unprecedented. We see this federally with the federal Conservatives, big tent parties. We've seen it under the BC Liberals.
Right.
And I anticipate a strong message from membership.
But it seems to me that a big tent party didn't work. Isn't that exactly what Rustad was trying to provide and said as much? And then you had people, walking away and eventually a coup.
A part of that is leadership style, right? And you and I have talked about leadership style and John's leadership style over the last year many times. And so this is, again, we saw somebody like Gordon Campbell, who was running a big tent party, stay in power in this province for over a decade. We saw Christy Clark lead a government lead the BC Liberals twice to government. And so this happens. When we look at the NDP, they're a big tent party too. I mean, the Greens are really pushing David Eby on where his position is. They're renegotiating the commitments that they've made and whether or not they'll actually come to an agreement. I think everybody's watching. But David Eby has redefined himself as a leader multiple times over the last year. I mean, like environmental policy, mental health issues. There's so many different things that the NDP are grappling with as well.
Right.
And that's just what parties deal with.
Sure. And Mo, I guess with all of that said, I mean, this has hardly been a banner year for David Eby. The province's finances have been heavily criticized. He's got labor unrest. His personal popularity is tanking. Is he just saying thank you to the Conservative Party for imploding right now?
Well, like, first of all, you're factually incorrect. If you take the last set of polls, David Eby's popularity rating is around 47%. A year ago, when he was elected, it was 47%. Where we stand in the polls today is around 42%, exactly the same number. In fact, we've never gone below that number since 2020. And in the last election, we got about 44% of the vote. So he's pretty well kept us right where we have been through just a steady, confident, competent form of leadership around a number of issues, which I'm happy to address in a second. But the purpose of your question really goes to the Conservatives. And let's just focus in on what Rachel had to say and what you had to say, because frankly, you hit the nail right on the head. The problem has never been John Rustad. It's been the Conservative caucus. That's the problem. Look, there are some people in that caucus that hold openly racist views, particularly with regards to the Muslim community, and they've said so. Those people are still in that caucus. That's not part of the big tent of British Columbia that I understand to be. There are some people in that caucus who, in a very obnoxious way, hold the view that deny that residential schools are engaged, or that they engage in residential school denialism, and they're still in the party. There are other people there who do not believe a woman should have the right to choose. They're still within that caucus. There's some people in that caucus who are paranoid about the efforts of Christy Clark and the BC United to take them over on one end of the spectrum. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there are 5 members of their own caucus that are afraid to stand up and criticize Donald Trump and the impact of his tariffs on our economy. These people are in a state of disarray, and they're entirely dysfunctional. And the contaminant that has to be rinsed out of that party is the extremism. And there'll be no leader. I mean, look, in the short term, there'll be a leader that'll come along and they'll try to pretend that they can unite. But when you have this type of extremism in a political party, the only way to rinse it out is at the ballot box. Those people who hold those kinds of views ought not to be in a caucus in British Columbia. That is not the BC that I know. It's not openly racist. It doesn't deny women the right to choose. It doesn't take obnoxious positions with regards to First Nations. So let's keep the focus where it is. John Rustad may be gone, but the contaminant within the Conservative Party is still there.
Right. And I just want to, I know you were quick to correct me, but in March, David Eby's popularity was at 53%, according to Angus Reid. 3 days ago, it's 40%. So I think you could say that's a significant slip over that time period, according to, again, a poll that's 3 days old from Angus Reid.
Well, okay, the last poll I saw was at 42%.
Yeah. Okay, well,
so
this
we can argue about this, but
I'm not going to argue about it. I'm just telling you what the poll says. Arzina, neither the BC Conservatives nor the BCNDP are in a terrific position right now. What does the Green Party do with this? Does this spell an opportunity?
Well, yes. I mean, as much entertaining as it is to watch the BC Conservatives implode, this is actually really awful for British Columbians. We've literally lost an effective official opposition for 2 reasons. First, it's this infighting that we're talking about, the backstabbing, the whispering in hallways, sending around secret letters. That doesn't bode well for confidence from British Columbians. The second reason is that, the BCNDP are basically singing from the same songbook as the BC Conservatives. So what is there to oppose? You've got, a repeal of DRIPA, check. David Eby has said he's willing to open up DRIPA again. You've got
what he's saying is that the legislators are no longer making decisions to do with DRIPA, that the courts have overridden them.
Well, we'll see. It sounds like he does want to amend the legislation that was passed unanimously by all parties a mere 5 years ago. And we'll talk about that later, I think. But he also corporate welfare for resource extraction. That's something that BC Conservatives have been pushing for forever. Check, he's done that. Involuntary care for those who are unhoused and suffering from mental illness. Check. So what is there to oppose? So the BC Greens are literally the only party that is pushing back against what the NDP are coming up with. So I think we've literally lost a sitting of the legislature where we could have had effective debate of the bills that were put forward, and instead we had all of this infighting.
The Premier says he's worried that the courts are in the driver's seat when it comes to DRIPA, and he said, this is a quote from him, "It's absolutely critical that it is British Columbians through their elected representatives that remain in control of this process, not the courts." What worries you about those comments?
What we need in British Columbia is some stability and some understanding around what DRIPA actually means. And unfortunately, the NDP have been all talk and no action. They've been given 5 years to implement DRIPA and ensure that they modernize legislation to enable the removal of colonial systems. And we're seeing now in the mineral extraction sector that hasn't happened. What happened the last 5 years? If we want industry to have stability and to know what the process is, the BC NDP has totally failed to implement this.
Right.
So what we need now is stability, and we need that through upholding the legislation that we've already passed. And the BC Greens are the only party that supports the affirmation of Indigenous rights. And we see this as a pathway to stability and prosperity for all British Columbians, not just choosing, political convenience when it the winds blow in different directions.
All right. And Rachel and Mo have got about a minute each. But Rachel, Trevor Halford says that Premier Eby has to recall the legislature and repeal the province's Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, or DRIPA. Would that not immediately put the government at odds with every First Nation in the province?
Well, I think that this is something that the BC Conservatives ran on. They've been very clear from day one that they would like to repeal this legislation. And the interesting part of this is that David Eby is now an NDP premier asking to increase our oil supply, build refineries, and change DRIPA, which we've never heard from an NDP party in this province before. But this isn't about just mineral rights, as you know, Stephen. Mm-hmm. This is about the courts redrawing land use rights. And that, like Arzina said, creates massive uncertainty in a time when we need it most right now. And so what the BC Conservatives have proposed, and we're going to hear from Trevor Halford later today, is that the legislature be recalled. This is an urgent issue based on a court ruling just from Friday, and that this legislation be looked at instead of dragging their feet the way David Eby wants to.
All right. And Mo, last word to you. Do the courts not play a crucial role in protecting the rights of Indigenous people?
They play a crucial role, but on the other side of the coin, so does government. And the politicalization of the judiciary, in my view, is a concern here. And no better example than the instability that has been caused by the Cowichan title decision. It's actually deterred investment from the province. And so we have to, the politicians, the legislature, has to be in control of those issues rather than the courts, to the degree to which the courts have, I think, overreached their mandate. On the other side of the coin, it's important to recognize that elements of DRIPA have worked very well. With regards to economic reconciliation, we've seen First Nations now take equity interests in 5 different mines that we're building to help become the economic engine of Canada. We're seeing First Nations get benefit agreements or take equity agreements with regards to the 3 new LNG projects that we're building in the province. And we're seeing First Nations take at least a 51% interest in the 9 new wind power projects that we're building in the province. So in terms of economic reconciliation, we have made significant strides since DRIPA came forward, and it ought not to be repealed in that regard. And in other cases, the courts have overreached, as they have in Cowichan. And I think Premier Eby is correct that to sort of deal with that instability, the legislature should step in if required.
All right. So good to hear from all three of you, as always, this morning. Thank you so much. It's an important discussion. We appreciate the time.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mo Sahota, former BCNDP cabinet minister, currently operates his own lobbying company. Rachel Siegel, former senior director of the BC Liberal Party and vice president and BC lead for Enterprise Canada. Arzina Hamir, former candidate for the provincial Green Party, currently operates an organic farm business in the Comox Valley.